Hi there, Zoë Routh here. Welcome back to the show. My question for you this week is, how can you learn more each day? And can you become a learn-it-all? And what is a learn-it-all anyway? Let's get into it. On planet Human, they have discovered that water existed on Mars 4.45 billion years ago at the time of the creation of the planets. So Mars and Earth created around the same time, and there was water there. They have looked at the planet and they've seen where the water courses were, which is very cool. It brings up so many different questions. Is there still water there underneath the ground surface? Did that water just evaporate and is it now a complete desert planet? Is there any other water there? Why is that important? Because it is a stepping stone for humanity to move off Earth and into the greater solar system and beyond. So this may take several decades, hundreds of years, maybe thousands, before we have communities on the Mars and off Earth. Water is essential for us. That part's not changing as part of our biology. So the signs are there. Pretty cool, huh? On Planet Zoe, I'm traveling home in a couple of days. So I'm pre-recording this episode before I go overseas on my big trip to visit the family and have a skiing holiday. And that's all about to end as I'm projecting into January. So, yep, should be back Australia side fairly shortly. What if and how might we? What I'm considering is, what if we made learning central to our leadership development agenda? And I know leaders have so much to contend with, is getting through your daily work, putting the leadership development or the learning development agenda on the table as a central focus for you doesn't always seem like the top priority. But what if we did? How might we do that? How can we make learning exciting and central to our leaders' day-to-day experience? Well, after my conversation with my guest today, I've been thinking about this, and I think we need to encourage curiosity. And one thing we can do for that is even a very simple thing that doesn't take a lot of time. In your weekly stand-up, you could have a fact of the week, and you can rotate who brings the fact of the week to the table on a particular topic that's relevant and useful for you, of course. That gets people curious about the world around them as it's relevant. So I think that could be a fun thing to put into place. You know, who's got the fact of the week? And you've got to dig up something interesting, relevant to your industry or your business. You could highlight the purpose of the learning. So it's not just go and learn something for the sake of it. If there is a purpose that can help improve work, that can help improve insights or capability, then you attach meaning to that. And I think that's a really a missing piece for a lot of learning programs. We can remove barriers to participation, remove barriers to learning. So could be reduce task load, reduce number of meetings, shorten meetings, create more time and space, which leads to my next point, which is make space for learning. And the last one is customize learning for each person. We have a great conversation, the guest and I, about this and how each of us learns a little bit differently, and we can develop our own personal preference of how we learn, adapt, and digest new ideas, new skills. So when we get to know our people and encourage them to customize the way that they learn, it opens up the world in terms of fast tracking that learning experience. So plenty we can do to make learning central to our leadership development experience. And it pays back because you have more curious, capable leaders. The whole boat rises amongst that tide. Does that metaphor actually work? Yes, it's that time again. It's tea time in the office kitchen. And my guest today is Damon Lembi. He is a best-selling author. He is the host of the Learn It All podcast and the CEO of Learn It. He is a lifelong learner and a fascinating individual who's got a lot to say about the future of learning. Without further ado, here's Damon. All right, all the way from Sausalito, California. Welcome to the show, Damon Lembi.
So it's great to be here, and I love the way you say Sausalito, California.
Yeah. Did you like the little dance that went with it too?
I was going to say that. Yeah, yeah. It was a great intro.
Well, thank you. I think I get excited when we start talking about learning, and this is obviously a massive topic for you. Can you tell me, how did your love for learning actually get started?
It's pretty funny. if I think about it, because growing up, I was never a fantastic student. I went to college really to be a baseball player. And when that didn't work out, I got into the business world and I started off at the front desk at this company I'm at, still learn it. And I kind of followed along the direction of my dad. He was a big reader. He was a big learner, always asking questions. And I just kind of jumped into it. I started learning how to teach some of our classes. Back then, we did a lot on like Excel and Word, and I really got fascinated. And as I kind of climbed the ladder at Learn It over the years, I knew that if I was going to be a strong leader, I had to really dive in and spend a lot of time learning. And so that's really what I did.
So you applied the whole principles to your own work life and trajectory. So I'm curious about, you've got this whole idea of learn it all. Now, when I hear that phrase "learn it all," I get a little bit overwhelmed by the thought of having to learn it all. Can you explain what that actually means, to have a learn it all mindset?
No, absolutely. So there's a learn it all and there's a know it all, right? So I think we all know somebody who's a know it all. You have a conversation with them, they've got a fixed mindset, they're not open to anything, they've got all the answers. And I don't know. I just think they're not that fun to be around. On the flip side of it, you have a learn it all. And they're open, they're humble, they're curious, they ask questions, they're good listeners. And I don't want you to get overwhelmed by the word all, like you have to learn it all. I just feel like you should put yourselves in a position where you can learn something from everyone. If my wife throws me into some dinner party that I don't really want to go to, I'll make the best of it by just getting curious and talking to people. And I'm okay with saying, hey, I'm not really that familiar with this. Can you tell me a little bit more? So that's what I mean by learn it all, just being open-minded and willing to learn. But with that being said, it's not just all about learning, especially in the workforce. You have to learn, you have to be able to execute as well. So there comes a time where whether you're reading books or you're taking classes or you're doing coaching, you got to implement as well what you're doing.
Yeah, well, that seems, otherwise, what are you learning for except to make yourself feel smarter?
But there's
uh,
people like that. I mean, right? There's
yeah.
people who spend 20 years in college and there's nothing wrong with that, getting one degree after the other and accumulating all this knowledge, but you got to put it into practice.
So is that a core, is that a different set of skills in your mind? Is like learning and then applying?
Absolutely. I think that it's one thing to be able to accumulate all this knowledge, and it's another skill to be able to implement it. And I think that it takes, it's one thing to pass tests and memorize things. It's another thing to take what you've learned and put it into action. And they're both learnable and they're both great. But I don't think that you can be super successful, especially as a leader, unless you're able to do both.
I agree. Do you think there's something that keeps people from, well, let's say, first of all, let's start with the learning thing. Why would people have a barrier to learning, do you think?
I think people have a barrier to learning, Zoe, because let's face it, learning is tough. It takes consistency, it takes effort. You have to get out of your comfort zone. And not everybody wants to do that. And a lot of times, if you learn something new, and you go to apply it, it means you're going to have to change the way about going about doing things. And not everybody is really open to doing that. Some people are pretty resistant. They want to kind of stay in their way, and they don't really want to make that effort or get out of their comfort zone in the sense that, okay, I learned this, I try something and I fail, and maybe they don't want to do a failure. So I think there's a lot of reasons why people are opposed to wanting to learning and changing.
I agree with that. In fact, because when you learn a new skill, you have to suck at the beginning. That's and sucking at anything sucks. And I just find that it takes that sort of grunt effort to get past that phase where you're not that confident at a new thing. Like I'm thinking about my recent experience of learning how to edit videos. Like it's not something I really wanted to do, but when my business manager left, I had to learn these skills for myself before I got somebody to help me with this whole procedure. So I had to A, pick a new technology to use, B, learn how to use it and flub it up and get frustrated and troubleshoot it. It takes an extraordinary amount of energy to get past that learning curve into when you're semi-competent. And that's nowhere near mastery, where mastery feels a lot more fun because you're finessing. So what strategies do you ask or share with people to help them get through that energy drain in that learning phase, that really steep learning curve phase?
Well, I look at it, I started getting into being a guest on podcast or speaking about 2.5 years ago. And kind of like what you're saying, when I first started, I was absolutely awful. I mean, it was hard to even watch myself afterwards and looking back now. But the first thing that I'd recommend to your audience is you just jump in and you do it, right? You go for it if it's something that's important to you. And you might also even think about it this way, like, what's the worst case scenario? If you go in and you fail, is that something you could live with? Of course it is. And also have the faith in yourself to know that you will get better as time goes on. If you keep doing it, if you keep going, if you go all in, if it's important to you, whether it's learning how to become a better video editor, learning another language, or being a speaker, I think it takes practice, repetition. And also, it's very important to focus and find deliberate practice. So if there's something you're struggling on, instead of trying to figure it all out at once, just really practice on specific things or try to get better at that. And once you do get a little bit better at that, then you can move on to something else. And also at the end of the day, have fun with it and give yourself a pat on the back for trying things because like we just spoke about a couple minutes ago, a lot of people don't stick their neck out there and try new things. And so I think we should reward ourselves more often instead of worrying about failure, that we're actually out there trying to learn and get better.
Uh, yeah, I think we can give ourselves credit for actually pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone to try new skills, techniques, software. And I think that's the big understated piece of this too is that I find that leaders are so time poor that they're just scrambling to stay on top of their regular workload, let alone do big picture strategic thinking, let alone learn new skills that can help them in service to that. How do people carve out time and space for this kind of energy rich commitment of learning new things? I think let me just, I'll seed in the answer and you can add to it. I think one of the things you said in there, it's got to be important to you. So you won't do it if it's not important to you. So I think having something that's important to you will help you carve out the time. What else do you recommend that leaders could, how else might they approach their learning journey with the commitment to time and energy?
First and foremost, like you said, exactly. You got to find something you're passionate about. It's hard to go all in if you're not passionate about something. Second of all, it's not something where I think you got to carve out a ton of time, hours here and there. Let's say, for instance, you enjoy reading. I think it's really important that you figure out what kind of modularity do you like to listen to books, or do you like to listen to documentaries or podcasts, or do you like to read or take classes or have a coach? Figure out what works best for you. And then say, for instance, with me, I love to read books. I don't have a lot of time. I run Learn It. I've got two little kids. So what I do is I carve out 25 minutes every morning, first thing in the morning. It's just a habit I've got myself into. And if I stick to that and I read for 25 minutes, that compounds over the year to 30, 40 books. But it's being consistent and it's finding books that I enjoy. If I don't enjoy, I'll put them down. So that's step number one. Carve out time, make it a habit, even if it's 15 to 20 minutes. Number two, and this even goes for senior leaders, find opportunities to learn in the flow, right? When you're at the office or Zoom or whatever, or you're collaborating, be curious, ask questions, find opportunities for learning. And also when you're out there, speaking to customers or others, just use every opportunity as a learning opportunity yourself right there. Again, ask questions, try things differently. So it doesn't always have to be formal learning. there's other ways to acquire knowledge through everyday activities, especially in the workforce.
I like that. Have an attitude of being curious and finding everything as a learning opportunity, whether it's at a networking function you don't want to go to, being curious, what can you learn in your conversations with people? I think that's really helpful. That also helps people get over the networking uh, reservation, hesitation, angst, um,
Miserableness.
miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find myself not going to networking functions anymore since COVID. And it's just like, no, I don't need to do that anymore. And I think I'm missing out, missing out on meeting new people and learning new things. I'm also curious about the theme for this interview is the future of learning. And I'm curious what's changing in how we learn and what's staying the same.
I think that's a great question. And I think learning is really evolving. I went to the ATD, that's the big conference annually in New Orleans earlier in the year. And there was probably 150 vendors there. And I would say 110 of them were AI vendors, right? AI coaches, AI assessments, all of this. So there's all these different ways you can learn. I just think it's important, though, to kind of cut through all of the noise and kind of find tools that can work for you, whether it's VR for role playing, whether it's AI coaches, and and leverage those along with the traditional ways of learning. I still don't think, and I'm not being naive about this, I don't ever think that face-to-face or live instructor-led training is going to go away. I think there's always a place for that. Um, but there's all the other tools out there now that can help make it more sticky and better with retention. So again, figure out what works best for you and your team, emphasize that type of learning. For me, I like doing, I actually prefer coaching over group classes, but then I supplement it with little AI tools that maybe will ping me with habits to do or things to try. So the at the pace that learning's evolving, like everything that AI has to offer, is we just need to learn how to leverage it for the best and just don't you don't need to try everything, but just find a couple tools that work for you and roll them out for your team and go from there.
I think part of the challenge is finding out what the tools are that are available. So you can go to a big conference like you did and see all the vendors and so on. I think that's really interesting that AI coaches are surging, and I'm not sure exactly how that looks. And I love an example of that. What I'm visualizing is how I use ChatGPT often is getting ChatGPT to coach me through a particular, well, often it's a technology problem. Like, how do I solve this problem on my computer with X? And then ChatGPT will walk me through it, or even Google's Gemini. So I flip between the two of them to get the best solution to help me troubleshoot
Great.
something. Is that an example of an AI coach, or is they actually formulated a particular persona and avatar for the AI coach?
Well, first of all, I think you just gave a mini masterclass for your listeners right there about what you should be doing. Where you're trying things out, right? You're trying them. You're getting. I leverage ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude all day long, and you keep trying. You get better at asking questions. And the better you ask questions, the better output it gives you. Now, I've never actually done AI coaching myself but they have that, right? They have the avatars and the personalized coaching that you can do. Again, I haven't tried it. What I have tried, which is actually super cool, is the virtual reality where
Mm-hmm.
you put the mask on. Or whatever the thing is, and I ended up in a conference room with a toxic high performer, and it was really cool. I had to have walk through a difficult conversation with them. So you walk through a difficult conversation with them, and then they take the transcript afterwards, and they give you talking points on what I did well and I could do better next time. So I mean, really cool things like that. I mean, we didn't have that 5, 10 years ago. So
No,
that's an example right there of leveraging technology, I think, for the best.
that's a really cool example and a great subject that I know all my leaders struggle with. How do you deal with a toxic performer, let alone a toxic high performer? Which platform is that associated? Is that something you've incorporated into Learn It?
No, we don't have it at Learn It, but the platform I'm talking about, you can put it in the show notes, is I don't have any stake in it, but I think it's a good company. It's
Mm-hmm.
called Mersion. And so Mersion Technology. And they were kind of at the forefront with it, and they do a really good job. And again, you could sit, you could read books, you could take classes, but we all know that going and taking a 2 hour class on how to have difficult conversations, you can't stop there. You got to continue going on. And a great way to do that is through role playing
Yeah,
and practice. So that's where the stickiness and the retention comes in.
I love it. So that was immersion or immersion?
Mersion, Mursiun, something like that. You'll find it, but it's called Mersion.
Okay, great. Thank you. I saw a prototype of that about 3 or 4 years ago, where it wasn't with the VR headset. It was basically a digital avatar, and you could run through a scenario with this digital avatar on a particular topic, and it would give you feedback. So this is taking next level with the VR headset. So you really do feel like you're there with the person, reading their body language and picking up on all their cues. Is that right?
Yeah, that's totally right. Now that I was thinking about it, I'm actually helping a friend who does something around, I think it's mood management in the construction industry, and he's building out all this curriculum around VR learning and
Yeah.
having a whole community in it. And I asked him why the VR piece of it, and I think he brought up a great point, and is that once you get past the resistance of putting on the goggles or whatever they are, and you get in there, he believes that people are going to be more centered and focused on the actual training opportunities, and the learning and being more present. So I think that that's fascinating. And that, even though I haven't spent much time there, I think that the virtual reality training is going to be pretty cool.
Do you think that COVID has really affected how people approach learning or not?
I think at first, you were probably in a similar situation. I'm like, what do we do? Right? I mean, all of our training, not all of our training, but at the time we were about 80, 85% in person. We
Mm.
did some virtual. And at first, a lot of our B2B customers were like, well, how are we going to learn emotional intelligence over Zoom? Or how are we going to, have difficult conversations? And so it was a struggle at first, but we found pretty quickly over time that it was a great way to keep people engaged. The breakout rooms were great, and it really has shifted the mindset, which just like doctors' offices where people go to and do virtual doctor's appointments, people are a lot more engaged and open to the idea of training virtually and really finding value in it, where it was an uphill battle, the first 6 months. And as people have become more open to virtual training, they've also become more open, I think, to incorporating some of these other tools that we're talking about. So
Mm.
I'm a big fan of the in-person face-to-face, but I also, again, strongly believe that you got to add all these adjacent tools to really hone in on, making your learning fantastic.
Yeah, I'd love, I'm thinking now about, let's say I have a topic that I want to explore. Let's say it's giving and receiving feedback. And I can look at the laundry list of tools and methodologies of learning from my learning provider or my training provider. And I can say, yes, I want to do face to face. Yes, I want to do virtual AI coaching. I'll skip the VR role play. Yes, I want the habit stimulator, habit
Yeah.
tracker piece.
Yeah.
And so you can pick all your different tools to set up your own learning environment, as opposed to what we have now, which if I go onto a place like Coursera, it's recorded lectures with tests. And that's basically, it's one way directional. Sometimes you have live coaching or live sessions with a human trainer, but that's basically it. I love the idea of having all these additional modules that you can bolt on to your customized learning platform. That's cool.
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, it kind of goes back to the beginning where we talked about getting overwhelmed. I think that you shouldn't try to boil the ocean and go for 1,000 different tools, because then you'll never get started on anything. But
Yeah.
explore a couple different things, just like you're doing with ChatGPT or Gemini. Explore a couple things that you get comfortable with and start using those tools. And there's nothing wrong with a Coursera or those asynchronous type training. Some people love that stuff, So again, I think it's important to kind of reflect back on what works best for me. What do I enjoy? And if you're somebody like Zoe, yourself or me, where you want to explore and you want to try new things, that I'm always doing that. I'm always playing around with different tools to see what I could use, what I could get better at. And I think it's super fascinating because of that.
So would you say that like the future of learning and corporate training is hyper customized? Tell me what you're crystal balling into the future of learning and training.
If I'm crystal balling into the future of learning and training, I think you're going to things just get distilled down to much more bite-sized training, even more so than it is now, and a lot of really in the moment training. So, and role playing again without other humans, right?
Mm,
I even heard, I think I heard one great songwriter, I think it was Will.i.am or somebody, and he said back in the day he'd have to have a couple people to bounce ideas off of, right? But now he just goes to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is his writing coach.
mm,
And that's kind of what I think learning can turn into as well, is that again, I think it's going to be a very long time before the live learning classes go away. I think you're going to have coaches, live coaches, human coaches and human facilitators. I think it's when nobody's around and you want to continue learning, the world's going to be your oyster, so to speak, with these
mm,
different opportunities, as well as, let's say you have a very difficult conversation coming up and you don't remember that framework or that model, and this thing just popped up and you got to have this conversation in 10 minutes. You can go onto some app, and you can replay or do some role playing right there to get a little extra shot, to get your confidence up going into that conversation. And that's going to continue to evolve over time.
mm. I think that's really cool. I think a large part of it too is coming to understand yourself as a learner. And not everybody is aware of how they like to learn. They just kind of take whatever spoon fed to them. So I'm thinking about the corporate HR, the learning and development professional, and how they then help their people in an organization learn how to learn or learn about their learning preferences as kind of the first step before then they customize a learning program. And I think it's going to be quite difficult, I think, for L&D professionals to offer, let's say, a leadership development program that suits all of their people. Like typically the work that I do is they'll an L&D professional in conjunction with their CEO will buy a leadership development program, and they'll put 15 to 20 people onto this program, and we do these different modules and there's homework in between. And it doesn't always suit everybody. A, if they have to come face to face to do it, or B, the topic's not that relevant to them right now, some other burning topic. And so you get this kind of up and down reaction or engagement throughout the program. But the curriculum is set, and there's just basically two methodologies of people being able to adapt. So it's going to be quite tricky, I think, for L&D professionals to be across all the nuance and customization of that. Have you got any suggestions for the people who have oversight of these particular kind of programs?
Well, I think it's very fascinating because we basically do the same thing, right? You get 15 people, you go through a cohort and you meet, well, let's say once a week for 6 months, whatever it is, right? Depends, whatever the program is.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that you said though, Zoe, which I think is super important, and really key, is learning how to learn. With the pace of technology, is how fast everything's moving. People are always coming to me, they're like, hey, learn it. What are the most important skills people need in the next 3 to 5 years? And sure, there's emotional intelligence, there's all the standard ones. I really think just learning agility is so important. The ability to learn, unlearn, relearn. So right there, for those HR directors or L&D directors, don't get super stressed out about it, trying to fit everybody in the right type of learning. I think what's most important is just try to get people excited or interested in learning, right? Because if they are and they're able to learn some concepts, fantastic. Now, getting back to your main question, hey, in the past, we never even had those opportunities, right?
Mm.
In the past, it was you put 15 people in a room. If you get 10 of them are excited about learning this particular way, great. The other five are just out of luck. At least now we have the opportunity to try to at least tailor or personalize those learning opportunities. So maybe we design the content where sure we the bulk of it is live instructor led, let's say, or coaching, however it is, but then we have add-ons where maybe it's even during that day they can go into a room or over into the other room and they could do VR or they can do asynchronous learning or something, right? Whatever it is, let's say it's a framework around giving feedback. Well, you could either go the VR route and do it, or you can go the asynchronous route, or you could even go an AI route. So that's like an alternative outside of the core learning. So maybe you do the framework first, and then you follow it up with your choice when it comes to retention, VR, or whatever else that could be.
I love it. Thank
Try to
you.
make everybody happy.
Yeah, I think that's the perennial
Which
challenge for
never
L&D.
works. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, with more tools, we might have more likelihood of that. Damon, are you ready for the fast three?
I'm ready.
Okay, good on you. Number one, what is the future technology you most want right now?
I would say that technology, I unfortunately don't have great eyes. So I'm really excited about the advancement of self-driving cars. I've been in a couple in San Francisco, but with the 6-year-old and 3-year-old, as my eyes progressively get worse, being able to self-driving is really going to help take off some of that load for my wife. So that's the number one technology that I'm excited about.
Oh, yes. It should have happened. Well, I've been waiting for this technology to be
Have you done it
everywhere.
yet? Have you tried it yet?
No, no. Well, in Canberra, we don't have self-driving cars. So
Yeah.
it's too much. There's only 500,000 people here. So it's not exactly a hub for innovation with regards to that technology. So I have been in a Tesla, which is
Yeah.
semi self-driving. So I've
Totally.
seen that
Yeah.
at play, and that's pretty fun.
Yeah. No, I did the Waymo was incredible. It
Mm.
was just me and a couple other people, no driver, and it was. I thought it drove better than the human.
Oh my goodness.
So
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Number two, what's the best tip you ever got for leadership?
a relatively recent one, which I put at the top of my list. A lot of people say, it's really important to learn how to give feedback. I want to
Mhm.
reverse that. One of the best leadership tip I've got in a long time is learning how to receive feedback,
Mhm.
especially as a senior leader. If I think being able to receive feedback is like rocket fuel when it comes to learning. So being open and learning how to receive feedback, I think, is a game changer for the best leaders.
How hard is it though? I mean, like,
It's hard,
is it?
you know. Well, I don't know. It's not hard if you could just take the ego out of it, right?
Right.
If you could take the ego out of it and you don't get defensive and you invite, I'm sure you teach this in your workshops and you learn to invite feedback and you create a safe space where especially your employees or other people can give you feedback. It's so crucial. Last thing I'll say about that is I was working with this gentleman who's a CRO of a portfolio company for some VC, and the technical founder had no idea about sales, no idea about sales. And when this guy that I'm referring to was trying to give him advice, this guy had no interest in hearing it, right? He could not take any feedback. And I could almost guarantee you that, you know, his technical product isn't going to sell itself. So
Mm.
unless he learns how to turn things around and receive feedback and be open to ideas, I think that he's going to struggle from a leadership perspective in his startup.
Yeah, and that's really useful feedback for sure. I think you're right now. I'm just thinking about some recent feedback I received, and it troubled me for 3 days. I had an emotional response to it, Not sure it was an ego one, possibly both, possibly ego and emotion. And I had to chew on it a little bit to see what I could take from the feedback that was useful for me and where I could dismiss parts of it because I didn't think it was helpful for me. And so, yeah, it does. You're right. It does take some effort to process it, and being open to it because it'll make me better is what helped me get through the emotional reaction to that. All right, number
And
three.
it doesn't, last thing I'll say about that, it doesn't mean that whoever's giving you feedback is 100% right either, but maybe there's a
Yeah,
grain of, maybe there's a kernel of truth in there, or maybe there isn't, right?
yeah.
And also you want to consider the source of there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into it, but just do your best to not get emotional, and, try to make a positive out of it. If it helps you get 1% better in something, good for you.
That's basically what I ended up doing. So there was a whole bunch of story around the person who was giving me the feedback, which was negative from my point of view. So
Yeah.
dismissive of them because of X, Y, Z. That was just hoopla, emotional reaction, ego stuff. Like, okay, that aside, is there anything useful in the content of the feedback that can help me? Yeah, okay. So I'll take that and park the story over which I had no control anyway, except for my own catastrophizing. So
Yeah.
that's how I approached it.
Good
Oh,
for you.
thanks. Number three, what are you reading or listening to right now?
Well, I'm one of those guys who read like 4 or 5 different books at a time. I
Yeah.
got my fiction books, I got my workbooks. I'm really enjoy reading. I really am enjoying reading Frank Slootman's book called Amp It Up. He was the CEO of Snowflake and a couple other companies. It's about hyper growth, and it's about a sense of urgency and leading. It's a really cool book. I really enjoy that. And as far as listening, I love the Smartless podcast. That's one of my favorites. And
Smartless?
yeah, it's 3 actors in the States, Jason Bateman, and they have phenomenal guests on. They're super funny. And I also think that it's kind of cool that they had Arnold Schwarzenegger on it. I mean, Obama, they had everybody.
Wow.
But it's you they bring these guests on. It's funny, but you also get to learn. Most of them are super humble, where they'll talk about things that didn't go well for them that they learned, and so it's funny, but it's also engaging, and I find that you can learn stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, Damon. That was the fast-ish three.
Fast-ish.
Okay, we're coming to the end of the show. Two questions left. The first one is, what question have I not asked that you would love to answer?
I would say, what question that you asked that you didn't ask is, are great leaders born or made?
Mm. What are great leaders born or made, Damon?
Great leaders aren't born or made; they're constantly in the making.
Oh, very
There you go.
nice. I love it. I love it. Damon, where can people find out more about you and learn it?
Well, great. I mean, the best thing to do is connect with me on LinkedIn, Damon Lembi on LinkedIn. I'm hosting a podcast, the Learn It All podcast, Zoe, that you're going to be on. I love that. So check that out. And, I have a book called The Learn It All Leader that you can find on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. So any of those places.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Damon. This was really fun. I love talking about learning. I love crystal balling into the future of learning and how we can help leaders be better leaders, and as they are constantly evolving, as you say. On Read to Lead today, I don't have a book. I have some platforms and some ideas of how you can digest different books. One of the apps I subscribe to is Blinkist. These are very quick written summaries as well as audio summaries of books that have come up. It's a great way to get across a lot of information, a lot of content quickly. And you can quickly, get through 10 books in a sitting of half an hour, just listening to these bite-sized contents. Perfect to listen to in the car while you're driving as well. So that's Blinkist. I recommend diving into audiobooks if you haven't done so. Great for doing parallel activities, either through if you're at the gym listening to things, which is what I often listen to my audiobooks, or driving. And you can subscribe to platforms like Spotify. Spotify now includes audiobooks in its monthly subscription. You have up to 15 hours of listening. So if you're listening to nonfiction, you can actually hop around in different audiobooks because they just do it 15 hours a month, and you can listen to different hours on different audiobooks. Audible is the other subscription platform. They're not great with their authors. So, that was a scrunchy face to Audible. And yet they have a huge collection of audiobooks available as well, fiction, nonfiction, you name it. And they have a plus catalog. So you can get quite a lot of listens, and they have a credit system. So you buy credits either as you go or in a year-long subscription, and that gives you 12 credits you can spend to buy books. Some books are shorter, some books are longer. So it's a different model. There's pros and cons to each of those. Depends on the platform you like. But audiobooks, you can listen at time and a half or higher. You can get through a lot of content that way, and you retain it more. And you can just train yourself to listen at fast pace. My husband doesn't like it. He goes whenever I have the audiobook not on my headphones and he's listening in. It does take some training, but it doesn't take that long to adapt, really. The other way to absorb information is through podcasts like this one. It's a fast way to get across a lot of content as you're doing other things. And my last recommendation is if you have a Kindle, an electronic book, you can highlight passages, which is what I do in my apps, either on the phone or in my iPad. I have the Kindle app there. And you can export those notes. So you can export your highlights. And so you have a summary of the book that you can refer to and build a blog on or process or share with others, which I think is a really helpful way to help deepen and consolidate the information that you're reading. So you don't just read a book and watch it wash down the river. You actually retain it. So that's everything on Read to Lead this week. That's it for the show this week. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you've got a comment or recommendation or feedback of any sort, feel free to email me, zoe@zoerouth.com, or pop a comment on any of the social platforms where we post the show. And be sure to subscribe in the app where you're listening and become a podcast insider, where you get all the juicy background extra bits like implementation sheets, recommendations, and interesting factoids to make you look smart. In the meantime, live with grace, lead in service, live well, lead well.